initiative to educate the public about the importance of firearm safe storage. My background in law enforcement for the past 30 plus years, I've seen where folks, I can remember one case where a gentleman had a nice car, had a convertible top, locked the car, left his firearm on the seat, but he didn't put the roof over it. So what we need to do is educate. We're not trying to take away anyone's Second Amendment rights. We're trying to enhance firearm safe storage and be responsible gun owners. And so this public awareness campaign that Deputy Secretary Lattimore and his team is leading is going to be website-based broadcast. It's going to be commercials, streaming, printed material, social media, and a toolkit for communities to enhance that. They're also purchasing gun locks for our citizens who exercise their right to the Second Amendment. Also, school safety was a high priority for Governor Cooper's administration starting in 2019 when he directed state agencies to increase their action on closing the crime reporting gaps between the state and the federal government in 2021. He charged our staff to come up with a comprehensive plan to prevent and to create safer schools within North Carolina. And on yesterday, if you haven't seen the news or the latest article, yesterday he signed an executive order and implemented a statewide Office of Violence Prevention, which will be housed in the Department of Public Safety. So yesterday we got that marching order. That is a recommendation from our TREC, our Task Force on Racial Equity and Criminal Justice, to support that, because right now, firearm deaths have surpassed motor vehicle crashes in North Carolina. And that is a shocking number. And as you turn on your TVs across this state, you'll see that number is rising. So the governor has tasked us at the Department of Public Safety to bring up and uplift this Office of Violence Prevention, which we are working, just started yesterday with the executive order, and we're working very diligently. So if you know someone that's interested in being an executive director with the Office of Violence Prevention for us to build that staff up, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and because we're starting a job description and personnel action in getting staff on board. So that's where we stand at DPS. I appreciate the partnership with you. It is a very important mission in making our schools safe, because education is one of our key components in reducing recidivism and also making productive citizens for our state. So I appreciate the time, Mr. Chair. They say down on Jones Street, I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank y'all and have a great day. I am going to have to leave, so I appreciate the time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary, for joining us today and giving us an overview. And I'm also excited to introduce our new lead for over the section that's over the Center for Safer Schools, and that's Dr. Jerry Oates from the Department of Public Instruction. He's a deputy superintendent, and so we're glad that he could join us today to give us a few welcoming remarks. I've met Dr. Oates before in his work in Brunswick County and in New Hanover County as a principal and worked with alternative schools for years, and so a great leader in this work and knows a lot about school safety, I'm sure, from those years in alternative schools. So Dr. Oates, thanks for coming today and welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. My name is Jerry Oates. I'm the newly appointed Deputy State Superintendent for North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And when I met with Chair Lassiter just a few moments ago, he asked me, how's it going? Said it's like drinking a cup of water from a water hose, from a fire hose. So I'm getting it all thrown at me at one time, but it's been a great transition into this position. As he stated, I was the superintendent of Brunswick County Schools for the past 5 years. However, prior to that, the bulk of my work over these past 28 years has been in the classroom as a teacher, has been as an assistant principal, as a principal, as a human resources director, as an associate superintendent before becoming superintendent. And this work that this group is doing and the Center for Safer Schools, is really the crux of my career. Spending most of my administrative time in law and alternative schools, I saw firsthand the work that takes place here. Working with students who have been placed, because I do not like to say put out or kicked out, who have been placed in alternative settings because of violent tendencies, these repeat offenders. My job in that particular setting was to do my best with every gift and talent that God has placed in me to change the mindset of those children and their parents. Because as we know, oftentimes children model the behaviors that they see. So if we can change those behaviors that they see through parents, through community work, through the school setting, the work of schools, safer schools, becomes much easier. It's not to say that it will be completely eradicated, but it will be diminished. So I look forward to working with this group, working with Director Fairley as she continues the great work that she's done in the center, as we begin and continue to make schools safe across this great state of North Carolina. So I look forward to working with you, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Oates, for joining us today. We appreciate you being here. And so before I turn it over to Karen, I'm just going to have everybody introduce themselves real quick to us. I saw some people walk in, so we'll just start in the back there. You want to go first?
Yvonne Moore, Richmond County, and I am a retired school social worker for 32 years, and I recently went back part-time 2 days a week because that's my passion. I love kids, and I love helping change the lives of those that I serve.
Rachel Johnson, Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Child and Family Wellbeing.
Bo Trumbo, North Carolina Emergency Management.
Alan Duncan, member of the State Board of Education.
Karen Fairley, Center for Safer Schools.
I'm Billy Lashram, the chair and the Deputy Secretary for Juvenile Justice.
Elizabeth Musto, Department of Public Safety.
Jasmine McGee, Director of Public Protection for the Attorney General Josh Stein.
Shalana Copany, Instructional Assistant at Rogers Lane Elementary School.
Evelyn Bullock, member of the Nash County Board of Education and also past president of the North Carolina School Boards Association.
And Donovan Bethea, a student member from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University.
Thank y'all, everybody for joining us. I think we have a few people online too, but we'll just go ahead and I'm not sure all the technical parts of that, but so Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you to do the executive director's report for this month.
Of course, I need a call. Good morning, everyone. Oh my, good morning. Good morning. Again, I'm Karen Fairley, the Executive Director of the Center for Safer Schools, and I just want to take a few minutes to give an update. There is going to be a part in there when I get to the EKG portion that I want to give a couple of minutes to Michelle Garino, who is going to update you on that initiative. So, on. So definitely the center, our mission, our vision, kind of revamped it a little bit, molded it so that it could be reflective of the work that we have to do, legislatively required to do, and should do. All right. So it's just to let you know, and that our mission and vision, it just was tweaked a little bit. But what we did add when I became director in 2021 was values. And I wanted that to be everywhere. Everywhere, our letterhead, when we go out, because what I needed to do is to ensure that the districts, the charter schools, understood that the Center for Safer Schools was supporting them. That is what we were there that is what we're designed for, and that is what we would do. And so I wanted them to understand that there would be as much consistency as possible. That's kind of sometimes challenging when you're in long session, but we're doing the best we can. The transparency, the integrity, the professionalism, and then the respect. Respecting the districts, respecting the charter schools, respecting that they know what's best for their individual regions and or districts or schools, but that we, as the center, would be that support that they needed. Am I doing this right?
There's a little bit more. Did it change on your screen?
It went blank on my screen. I didn't do it, y'all.
Branding system, everybody, I apologize.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah. We just got all this new equipment, so that we could do live broadcast, so we could do the online version here. So we're still learning it, but so bear with us.
So these are the legislations that apply to the center. And the last two, SB 105 and House Bill 103, are the ones that we're currently working on. You know, anything that was already legislation, of course, we know we still adhere to it, but there were modifications made to what our responsibilities, what our powers, and what our duties were. And they were done in Senate Bill 105 and House Bill 103. And so what the center does, the center is growing, but the tasks are so much so that our first priority is what is required of us legislatively, because it's just not enough hours in the day or manpower currently to do anything else. And so we move with that as much as possible. And if you get an opportunity, Senate Bill 105 is chock full of information and powers and duties that are required of us. So this is our DPI map of how we break up schools. I know DPS may do it slightly different in other agencies, but this is how we do it. And so what will happen is that we have secured enough money that we will be hiring school safety specialists in each of those regions. They will live in the regions, they will work with the school safety directors, they will work with the local law enforcement, they will work with school administrators to support in each of these regions. And so we are in the process of preparing to post those positions. So if you know anyone who has a passion and can stand working for me, there you go. These are some of our initiatives. These are some of our Center for Safer Schools initiative that we have started in the last 24 months. We started a community and parent engagement project because what we understood was that school safety starts at the house and in the community, and it comes into the school, and then the reverse. What happens in the schools go back out into the community and sometimes to the house. So one of the main things that we have done is connected with the North Carolina PTA to have them help us with the parent portion. So I secured federal funding, and we will be hiring a community and parent engagement persons. There'll be 2 separate people. And you're gonna hear me a lot say we will be hiring, because we are ready to be on a hiring spree. We started a student engagement section because we understood that who better to know what's going on in the schools than the students, right? So we started that. The SAVE program was already initiated throughout the state. It is connected to the anonymous reporting system that we have currently, and the SAVE clubs are growing. So we hired a state student engagement coordinator to work with that, and then we ended up having to hire a couple of more people through federal funding to support that one person. And so we have the SHINE program, the SEED program. The SHINE program these are both pilot programs that we got federal funding for, to do a pilot to see and kind of work out at the state levels some of the challenges. And then it is our hope that we will take those programs, develop them into a best practice, and then distribute it out and support the districts in doing it. And we felt like at the state level, since we could get the federal funding, that it would be great if we did it and then helped the districts with that. So before I continue, I'm gonna ask Michelle if she'll come up. I think, no, Michelle, I got a whole slide. I'm sorry. I forgot, I got a whole slide. So she'll talk about EKG too at the time the slide comes up. And then we have started a Center for Safer Schools multidisciplinary team, because what was happening is we meet with the school safety directors on a regular basis, quarterly. But every district has different things going on in them. And then you add in the charter schools and it becomes like a lot. We're talking over 2,800 schools. And so I started a multidisciplinary team where I selected people who were educators, law enforcement, school social workers, school counselors, parents, community youth serving organizations, anyone who wanted to do this work to support the center. And we could hear from voices, but we also made sure that we bring somebody from each of those 8 regions, so that we didn't have everybody just from the Raleigh area, as far as, Murphy to Manio kind of thing. And then we also have a school safety director advisory council. We've had that for a while, and you probably heard me talk about it, but I'm excited that we, in August, will have completed the first 2 years, and now we're going to be looking for new ones, because their commitment level was 2 years. Now, if they want to stay, we'll be more than happy, but if not, then we will ask safety directors from within the regions, so we have 2 per region, and their whole focus is to talk with the center, push out information to the districts, and then bring in information from the districts to the center. And so the model will change now, because now those school safety director advisory council members will work with that student engagement person that will be in each region. So one of the things we understand that technology is good and it's bad, right? And so sometimes it works well, sometimes not so well. We started a Team Tech Tuesday where the staff put together information for the youth at the top and for parents. And these are things that, trends. I've been with the center since 2016, and I cannot tell you how many apps and technology advancements have happened from 2016 till now. And the truth is, I can't keep up with it. So we have people, the student engagement coordinator, along with our public relations specialist, who works to get this information out on our social media to students, but also to parents, so that parents can understand what is going on, trends and what's happening and challenges and all of the things that relates to that. Our school safety grant program, we are proud that it's growing. We started off with approximately 18 million in SRO funding. We are now up to 33 million in SRO funding, and 41 million in what we call safety equipment, student crisis training and training. And I have asked the General Assembly to be so kind as to make that money recurring. So, and the positive thing is I did get a call back from Representative Torbett, who is over the education committee, and so they are looking at that. And so why we need it is because we ended up having almost 90 million in ask. And so what we feel like is that if we can have that recurring, especially the 41 million, districts can plan better, because we know that post-COVID, there are a lot of issues as it relates to supply chain issues and things, and it's just not, you can't get contracts and things like that as smoothly within a year as you had previously. The Secretary Buffalo already talked about the panic alarm. I included that because we are full partners. If you don't know, the center was born in DPS, and so at the time the language was written, we were part of DPS, but we still feel like whole partners working with Assistant Director Trumbo, and he and I are working diligently to get this into the schools. We had our safety advisory meeting yesterday, and I announced I'm glad we had Rave come in, and we're looking forward to schools supporting that effort. We have the Anonymous Say Something app and system, and so we're not calling it an app anymore. And here's why: an app is an app is an app. And probably most high schoolers could create an app if they had to, of some sort. We're calling it a system because of the crisis center and the systematic way that we handle the tips. The crisis center, I went and saw it myself personally. It is second to none. This is coming up for renewal, and I've asked the General Assembly to give me additional funding to continue it. We have had over 20,000 tips since its inception in November 2019, when Assistant Director Trumbo was the center director. And so it is well needed. These are our top 5 tips and accounts from August 1st through September 28th. And as you can see, bullying and cyberbullying is almost always number 1. And we definitely need to figure out a way to address that. I think in 2017, I created this thing called RISE. And it was a conference that I really put together at the last minute for GCC funding, and it has grown, and we're appreciative of it. And this year, the conference will be in Gastonia. But what we thought we would do this year, and what we'll continue to do, is create these mini rises. They're, for lack of a better term, lunch and learns. They're 30 minutes, and they are done during lunchtime, and it's virtual, and it just allows us to bring topics to our constituents, to our safety directors, educators, but any school personnel. And these are just some of the topics that we have scheduled now. Okay, did I miss the slide?
So I need to get up and down here.
Yes, I know. Okay, so I'll talk about that. If it ain't, you just make it, okay? Our 10th anniversary, the center's 10th anniversary is March the 19th. center has been in existence for 10 years. And so we are having a celebration on this Friday to just acknowledge the work that has been done over the last 10 years. So our scheduled speakers, and we are going to, it's 10 years, we're gonna kick off a 10th month of anniversary events where we'll be talking about things every month, some type of event, some type of activity or something to market. Yes, so Michelle, I'm gonna have you come up because, you sure? Yes, I'm positive. And I'll just need a minute.
Well, good morning. I know a lot of the faces been here. I'm Michelle Garino. One of the things that I do in my life is I serve as a consultant for Karen. She said earlier, if you can stand to work for me, then come on. I can only stand her part-time. So that's why. Karen's done an amazing job with the center, and part of that was the EKG2 program, educating kids on guns and gangs. So in the essence of time, I will save you the long story of how it came to be, but I will say, in my role as the Director of Program Development for Gang Free North Carolina that falls under the North Carolina Gang Investigators Association, we had a grant that enabled us to create this program. And as we all know, working with grants, there's always an end. And you always are forced to find sustainability. And we really tried very hard to find a way to continue that work with Gang Free North Carolina, and the money just wasn't there. So I went to my friend Karen and said this would be a perfect meld of the two worlds: school, guns and gangs, and safety. And so she took that on, and we have been rolling that out into 12 pilot sites. The sites were determined by our partners with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We chose 4 from the Eastern District, 4 from the Middle District, and 4 from the Western District. We have gotten a number of phone calls, people from Boys and Girls Clubs, pro-social activities, other schools outside of those 12 pilot sites wanting this program. And I'll give you a brief overview of what it is. We have created a 7th grade, 9th grade, parent, youth, and after-school activity program. This is a curriculum that is administered or facilitated by the school resource officer in a health elective class. It lasts for 2 days. This way we can get through the most students in the class that is most fitting around health and safety. Right now, the pilot is only in 7th grade. Some SROs are co-facilitating it with a teacher, a health instructor, a school counselor, so that the schools that we have a single SRO, that SRO is not tied into a classroom. They can continue to walk the school grounds and participate in school safety functions while continuing to co-facilitate this program, but not in that classroom contained for 2 days. Right now, I brought my pilot list up so I can share it with you. Because I know some of you are saying, is my place on this list? Let me tell you. And the Middle District is doing amazing work right now. So in the east, we have Rocky Mount, Greenville, Pitt County, Elizabeth City, and Kinston. The Middle District is Lee County, Sanford City, Randolph County, Rowan County, and Davidson County. And the Western District, we're looking at Charlotte Meck, Asheville City, Buncombe, and Statesville, Iredell. To go back to what this curriculum looks like, it is done with coordination from a licensed clinical social worker, a school safety specialist, and also someone who's very familiar with DPI and instruction in the 7th grade classroom. We shot a movie that complements the curriculum. So we sit and watch the movie, which probably lasts about 17 to 20 minutes. I can share the trailer with you guys if you are interested. And we watch that movie, which dictates a lot of things are happening in our classrooms and our school environments, from sexting to gang activity, to gun violence, to the use of opioids. It is all in this really short film. And then we start to process that. We give them homework of just writing brief reviews or thoughts or feelings about what they saw. We are hoping to tangentially also train the school social workers, if they are not already trained, in trauma-informed care, so that we are not inducing trauma when we are looking at the things that may also be co-occurring in these children's lives or their environments, so that if someone needs to remove themselves from the classroom, they have a place to go. That the school social workers are very informed around what's happening in this movie and then can step in if need be. We see this as a win-win. We do not see this as something that is going to induce trauma. We see this as an outlet that someone can then be validated that these things are very real and happen to other people than just themselves, and they have a way to go speak to the social worker about it. So, plans after the 12 pilot sites are complete. Karen and I are working on what that looks like, the financial means to be able to continue to do this free, or as much as that we can, and then our areas that are interested to take on a little bit more of that burden with the booklets and the curriculum costs. Outside of that, we are creating a waiting list. Email me if you want to be on the waiting list, because we're going to start working through that as soon as these 12 pilot sites are complete. Yes. Did I do good on time? I know we didn't try to work that in there, but there you go.
Thank you, Michelle. And so, I'm getting ready to wrap my portion up. Matt Rebuck is here, and we'll talk a little bit about he'll talk about the training center, but just to know that one of the things I think in SB 105 was that the center would get a training center dedicated to the Center for Safer Schools, housed and supported by the Department of Public Safety. And so he will talk a little more detail about what that looks like. But we did have our January 24th opening, because although our permanent site is not ready and won't be until probably, well, I'll let him do it, because then it'd be on him. But we currently, DPS and San County was gracious enough to let us have a facility to utilize in the interim. And so one of the things before I take my seat is I want to let you know the center is growing. We are growing. Thanks to the General Assembly, they have provided us. I think we're like almost 5 times our operating budget than we were when I took over. So I'm grateful to them. I have staff from the center. If you'll stand. We have Karen Everett. She has been with the center longer than me. And so she is part of our safety. We have Felicia Epps, and she does our operations. And we have Debbie Walker, who is very, very new. Because the center is getting so much money, because we are having so many legislative requirements, and because my law school background states that I'm not gonna get as many passes as other folks, I decided to hire my own compliance person, right? And that person, Debbie's job is to make sure that everything I do is legislatively sound, fiscally sound, and all that stuff. So that when you see me in the news, it won't be for something derogatory. A lot of pressure. And then Charles Kennett is our public relations specialist. DPI does a great job, has a great communications division, but I felt bad because the center was overwhelming them because they had all of DPI, but almost always the media requests were coming as it relates to the center, right? And depending on what was going on, it would be overwhelming. So we hired Charles. He does public relations. He answers those media requests, which are a lot. And he schedules those media times for me. And he takes pictures that he's been instructed to do in a certain way. Thank you. And we have a training director who's at San Marcan, who's housed at San Marcan. And it anticipates that we're probably going to be hiring in the next 90 to 120 days. somewhere around 16 to 17 more people. Yeah. That is it, I think. Oh, look, I got the same outfit that I had on that picture. See, you didn't see, Sherry. Oh, there you go. And that is our, contact information, and that is it. If anyone does have any questions, please let me know.
Are there any questions for Karen? Any questions for Karen? Matt, if you want to come on up and we'll get the PowerPoint up and we can open the floor to questions to Karen while you're coming up. And if there aren't any, then you must have done a really good job. Rachel?
Well, we don't have that PowerPoint. I was trying to write down like the current tips.
Yeah, Charles, so yes, Charles will make sure that the task force gets a copy of the PowerPoint.
So Charles, if you just want to send it to Aaron, and Aaron will send it out to the whole group.
That'd be good.
Any other questions for Karen?
I have one more. Yes. Not for Karen, but regarding the EKG2, and you mentioned the counties where it was. You said whom selected those counties?
The U.S. Attorney's Office representatives.
And that was based off of what?
Based on a previous partnership that we had with them, under our Game Free North Carolina grant. We'd already entered into a partnership with them. You are familiar with Project Safe Neighborhoods, PSN. They are the ones who are the oversight for that. So we had partnered with them, and to be true and genuine with that partnership, we brought that into our work here.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to hand it over to Matt Rebuck, who's the director of the Samercan Training Academy, and we have a great partnership with the Center for Safer Schools that has started up a new training academy on safer schools. This is kind of a first in the nation type of endeavor, and we're really excited about it. So Matt, take it away.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Executive Director Fairley, Chairman Lassiter, for the privilege to brief you all on the Center for Safer Schools Training Center, which is about 113 acres in Biscoe, North Carolina, about 8.7 miles from the 460 acres of main campus that we have at the DPS Academy, known as Samercan Training Academy. Just a quick recap. In early 2022, DPS was able to purchase the old East Montgomery High School campus. And that's 113 acres. About 33 of it is woods, and about 80 is serviceable platforms that would belong to any average high school in the state of North Carolina. This is the old school itself, and thankfully you're not looking too close, because if you were, you could see under Home of Eagles quite a bit of, did I do that? There we go, of roof insulation that's hanging down and leaking. So we have some challenges. But EPS was able to spend about a little over $1 million to purchase this 113 acres. We were given in the 21-22 fiscal budget $8 million. And so we have about 6 of that left, and I'm going to explain where it's going. And then we expect to get another 8 and 15 million effective July 1. We don't know exactly yet what that will be. So we're in construction phases with Smith Sennett, which is a construction designer that's been hired through Central Engineering. And phase 1 is a security fence and new pavement. I'm going to flip back and forth here just to show you some renderings. So the front of the school is to your right, coming off of 220. And the dark black or dark gray area is where new pavement will be put in. And you can see the border. That's where we will have a fence that will protect the property. We have some youngsters who have damaged the property over the past few months. Not too bad. And so we want to protect the property and keep it secure and separate for many reasons. That fence should start construction in the next 30 to 60 days. Ms. Fairley is very smart in dodging any type of timetable because the goalposts get moved quite frequently in the labor market and the material market world due to the state of just the way things are right now. And so we were hoping to have that fence started in January, but again, it got pushed out into March. Now it might be April for various delays in the process. We are already training at the academy with different police departments, and I just like to draw your attention to the way it's set up. So some of the scenario-based training that's occurred has started out in the upper corner there, and the police officer will respond to the other side to get the adrenaline flowing, and we want to train as realistically as possible. So having that great pavement there will facilitate that. I'm going to step back just a second. So phase 1 should start in the next 30 to 60 days. Phase 2 is the administrative building and the roof. I'm going to go back to the overhead. This building right here is currently the administrative building. However, just in the last year, the back of the floor has sunk at least 1.5 inches, so we have some structural issues. In constant contact with Executive Director Fairley and members of legislation. Right now, as of this moment, we're considering putting a new office building that will house DPI mostly, and a couple of DPS, and possibly some mental health professionals, whatever the future takes us, right over here, which will allow this to be more of an admin side, and then everything in the other areas to be for those scenario-based trainings and classroom training. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this is the main high school, and this is the courtyard, and every bit of this is earmarked for scenario-based training. And some of it we can multi-purpose use. We do plan on putting 2 stairwells in the gym so that everyone that trains there can train on stairwells that would be consistent with all of the high schools across the state of North Carolina. We also plan on creating a 4-corner hallway right here. That's the one thing we do not have, is a hallway that brings 4 corners together, and I'm told there's some very unique tactical challenges to that, to navigating a 4-corner hallway. Eventually, that's like phases that aren't even on the paper yet. We would like this to be state-of-the-art from a physical security standpoint. We're not sure whether vendors will help fund that or not, but that's down the road. In the meanwhile, again, this entire area is meant to replicate the average school in the state of North Carolina. So those that train there can have some familiarity and get some very realistic training reps. The cafeteria is right here, and it does have a partially working kitchen. So right now we're looking at that as a multi-purpose venue where we can serve lunch to any trainees and staff that are there by just having Trinity, which is our contractor at the main campus, bring some large food containers out and then use what's there, which are like warming shelves, facilitate that. I believe that's everything for that slide that I can think of. Now, this is the admin building in the upper left. The auditorium is second to left. Again, the auditorium. And this is the maintenance, and this is down on the football field. So this is, let me go back, just show you where we're at. Classroom building is right here. There's a breezeway that may or may not make it through renovations. We're not sure yet. It's not in great shape. But that is where we will have dedicated classrooms. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is a very large classroom that used to be a music room. And so we intend to have 8 classrooms that are dedicated classroom space, not for scenario-based training. We hope to put a 360-degree simulator in here and possibly a mock dispatch center in one of those office buildings. Again, a lot of this is, we're still in the stages that we can discuss. We can make adjustments left and right for everything that's not affiliated with the pavement and fence. This is the football field house, which we do not have a picture of. The auditorium seats 700 plus, almost 800. And again, there is a maintenance building there that our maintenance folk will be housed in. There are currently 4 modulars, but I'm very concerned about the safety of those modulars. So we may end up salvaging one, and we may end up purchasing one. I'm just not sure yet. This is the admin building here that it has a sinking floor in it. And it has a bunch of block walls and already set parameter. And so what we hope to do is be much more efficient and effective with a new admin building and decide down the road whether we just restore that for scenarios or whether we completely knock it down and demolish it. All right, let's talk about some recent training events. This is one of them from October, and I've got a couple of short videos. There will be some recorded gunshots, so don't be alarmed. And I'm going to get very slow, very short. And one more that's the same scenario, just a different camera angle from out the hallway. Go. There we go. Whoa, that's our instructor.
Ethan, streamline as they get closer. So a lot more, right? Open door right up.
This is a classroom for dispatchers. The gentleman right there is the lead investigator for the Sandy Hook tragedy from 2012. His name's Dan Jewis, retired Connecticut State Trooper. And so he spent 2 days training, I think it was 30 dispatchers from North Carolina. And then I think it was 16 police officers in the earlier videos. And what he emphasizes is shaving seconds to save lives. And there's a lot of good training out there. This is just one example of it. Upcoming training, again, this is the Academic B building, which on main campus we have set and assigned to serve the Center for Safer Schools mission while we build the permanent facility for the Center for Safer Schools. March 16th, we got reunification training and technical assistance workshop tomorrow that was set up by Quentin Trent. And again, on March 30th, an adolescent substance use and proactive intervention class. We have numerous police departments and the federal alert training in the process, I should say pending, for the school. The school gets used quite often. we're in the process of, getting into that construction phase where we're gonna have to just figure out on a day-to-day basis what can and can't occur there while construction is going on. This concludes my briefing. Are there any questions for the role of the Center for Safer Schools training facility? Yes.
Go ahead. You mentioned the modular. Will they be part of the what did you call them? The training, the live training?
Scenario-based training.
Scenario-based.
Yes, ma'am, because the goal is to train for every possible setting that may be out there in the state of North Carolina.
And then my second question is around, how do you train for youth being in the classroom? Because, if you have a youth in the community that comes into the school, I imagine that it's difficult when law enforcement come in to sometimes distinguish between who are the kids who are hiding for safety versus the child or children
Yes.
that might be the perpetrators in the situation. So how are they able to train for that in an empty setting versus a live action?
So they would require the use of role players. And so my staff was some of the role players. We're in the brainstorming process of figuring that out. But the beauty of how we tackle that is the integration that will occur between the three professions here in a multidisciplinary school safety team, which, has law enforcement, education, and mental health. And to replicate a role, we want to train for the event. We want to train pre-event, event, and post-event. And part of the pre-event training is behavior and detecting behavior that is risky. So we envision scenarios in the future where we have role players, we have educators, we have anything. You picture it, we want to, replicate what a school will look like, not just physically from a material standpoint, but the people in it. And then inject certain behavior and then see if a teacher or a student role player does what they should do in the field, which is report it. Then the reporting goes through its process, mostly through DPI, but eventually it might go to a beta task force officer or agent, and then, practice the intervention, but also practice, if it gets through, we're going to practice for the event itself, and then practice for the resilience building, support, investigation, post-event.
And I also want to say about the scenario-based training, the Center for Safer Schools purchased a school bus that will be housed out there so that we can have the drivers trained as well.
I think he had.
Sir.
So, for the comment sections and question, on mobile units, you may want to, with some of the school construction around the state, you may want to see if you can get it used when it's not falling apart. And most of them are falling apart.
Right.
And I say that only because the cost of mobiles is going up. And the other thing about trying to hit every scenario, there's a lot of 4 mobiles and 8 mobiles now that are one unit. So it gets harder for you to get every conceivable scenario. The question is, where are we in, is this a part of what you're doing? In terms of coordination of surveillance cameras, I think greater surveillance cameras have gone into schools in recent years. In some instances, law enforcement wanted to try to obtain access at all times, and there's privacy issues that schools are not enthusiastic about that. On the other hand, if it was actually an active shooter situation, would want law enforcement to be able to access the surveillance. Sir, cameras, is that part of this training, and where are we on that tension point?
It is. So the tension point remains to be addressed, but as far as the facility, it is part of the plan, which I believe would be part of phase 3 when we do the infrastructure of the main building. So we need cameras for training feedback. And that's the purpose that we would probably override everything else. But it, like you just said, it is a replica of what is out there and the ability to use that camera to function through the role of the scenario. And the privacy issue, understand, and I look forward to assisting.
Seems like some concerted effort needs to be made that law enforcement does not have access to school's concerned, does not have constant access. But the flip side is if there's any situation that arises, has the ability to have immediate access. Things like that, you mentioned what you want to work agreements on. But that's been sort of dragging for 4 or 5 years now. We probably need to move past that quickly.
Serve whatever you'd like me to do with that. Yes, yes, ma'am.
It's very disturbing, but thank you for your work. I appreciate it. It's disturbing that it's necessary. My question is about, so we have a lot of conversation around the school to prison pipeline and the need for people to understand the proper use of an SRO, to use SROs, for, true law enforcement purposes and not to, for just school discipline, et cetera. I heard a presentation at a Governor's Crime Commission meeting about active shooter training and the difficulty of training law enforcement to be guardians, to play the role of to not be arresting their way out of every problem.
Indeed.
And then in these situations, ask them to shift into a warrior mode that we've told them not to be otherwise, because a warrior is what is needed in that moment. And so I'm just wondering, what your philosophy is on that. How can you do both of those things? How can you make sure that you are preparing law enforcement for these moments that are terrifying for all of us, but also making sure that we aren't in those moments, we're not perpetuating other challenges that we have.
Absolutely. And for me, the key is partnering, serving the best interests of society as a whole and not one single profession. We need to protect our children. I try to say this. My daughter is a 29-year-old second grade teacher in Buckhorn Creek, Holly Springs, and she's in a module, and she talks to me about her safety drills and the pluses and minuses of those. But circling back to the notion of guardian versus warrior, which is a product of the 21st century leadership, I like the analogy gardener much better. And it goes back many, many years. And if we all, especially police and the public trust that needs to be repaired, restored, cultivated, maintained, if we all embrace the notion that our communities are diverse and they each need different levels of assistance, support, and I have a whole nother slide deck on this, but some plants need more sun and less. Some need protected with a greenhouse. Some are in raised beds. Some grow in rows. Some don't. But the gardener has to pay attention in detail and prune very delicately so that they don't get a piece of the plant that is growing. And yes, we've talked we've talked gardener versus warrior, warrior versus guardian over and over and over again for the past 7-8 years. And I do believe it is possible to turn into a warrior and defend those that we love, those that we serve. But your concern is very valid. And I believe, and I've discussed this, that it begins with North Carolina establishing their own doctrine on what the role of a school resource officer is. On one hand, we've seen in the press the SRO who's disciplining a 6th grader or whatever and gets into use of force that nobody wants to see. And then on the other hand, we see a school resource officer that's banished to the intersection in front of the school and not told to come any further. We need to find together, all three professions, where that sweet spot is, delineate it in writing, and then have it accepted and move forward if we can across the state. Unfortunately, one of the school districts in Connecticut just a couple of days ago succeeded in getting police banished from school property. And for us, that's tragic. If you ever get to listen to Dan Jewis talk about the seconds that make a difference in those lives during an active shooter, it's tough.
And I do want to say that the center has been charged with developing curriculum to train administrators on how to best utilize SROs, and then also training SROs in cultural and sensitivity training. So the center supports SROs in the school because we give out the monies for them to be there. But it is our contention that they, it's like with any profession, there's great and then there's not so great. And so our focus is to work with all of them to get them to what Matthew said, that sweet spot.
So Karen, what is the policy around eligibility and how SROs are chosen? Because I know years ago, we did a training and there's an SRO presentation. I can't remember. I think it was in Cary or something. Billy, you were there. Do you remember what I'm talking about? We talked about all facets of SROs, from the continuing education and the training, but also how they're chosen. And some SROs get chosen because they weren't good on the street and something didn't go well. So you're going to be put into a school, the SRO almost as a punishment. Others wanted to be. Some were voluntold. And so I think part of what you're saying is about how do you even get there? Do you have a heart for the children in the community, or you put there as a punishment? And so the center is giving out the funds for the SROs. Does the policy sit with the center? Where is it still individualized across school districts and how, or excuse me, across law enforcement, and how they choose who that SRO is going to be in that school?
And so,
yes, we don't address that. Some of these other things are gonna continue to be that snowball effect because of who that original person was and were they the right fit, or were they just the person that got put there?
So we, couple things, we do a survey every year, and if off memory serves me, it's more than 70-some% asked to be SROs in our survey. Okay, so there was 20-some% that were probably voluntold. So two things. Number one, we can't tell law enforcement how to run their sheriff's department, police department. What we can do as the center is work towards working with local law enforcement. And that is the reason also for my aid specialists to work with law enforcement and help them to make that decision. But we also, the center, I've been doing this as the leader only 2 years, and we'll get to all of it, but eventually. But one of the things that we know that's important is to help local law enforcement build that relationship with the schools. And that's our first step, because if they build the relationship with their individual schools, then they can look at their MOUs. Because the biggest challenge is no one is reading the MOUs but the lawyers, the people who drafted it up. So that has to be in the MOU, and it has to say, this is what this person, we're ABC Elementary School, and we want only SROs who want to be SROs. So this is not just on the law enforcement, it's also on the school to say what they want. And so we're looking within the next, hopefully, year or so to build policy around that. But before we do that, we want to go out and that's part of my MDT, my multidisciplinary team, to talk about that. So law enforcement can say to me, this is why we do this for the 28% that are voluntold. And it's never going to be perfect, but we'll do as best we can. And I think 70-some% doing it is pretty good.
I do. I agree. That's pretty good too. But then my question is, why do you want to be there? Do you want to be there again because you have a heart for children, or do you want to be there as a disciplinarian because you've seen things and now this is my opportunity? Right. So there's lots of variations. That's not for this conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll just add that we did some initial research through the track, the task force on racial equity in the criminal justice system, and looked at the ones that got grants, the SROs that got grants, especially ones that were going into elementary and middle schools, because I know there were some concerns about, was this going to perpetuate the school to justice, school to prison pipeline? And what we have found, the initial data so far, and this is just early data, because we're just having these grants in the last couple of years, is that it actually reduces the number of juvenile complaints being filed on those school campuses because the officer is trained and has been working with juvenile justice. And this is their career. I mean, this is what they're trained to do is work with juvenile justice. They know, hey, there's a diversion in my community that this kid would be better suited to go to than me filing a complaint on them. And versus having an officer that's coming in that is on the beat and the school is calling and saying, hey, I got an emergency, then you just get the first officer that comes off the street into that school that's never worked with juveniles before, and doesn't know how the juvenile justice system works and doesn't know what the diversions are that are available in the community. And so they have one tactic, and that is to file that complaint and to push that kid forward in the juvenile justice system. And so that's one thing that we can look at. I know Jasmine asked me that same question recently also. We can present some of that data at the next meeting so that we can kind of show you what we're seeing. But overall, what we know is someone that's been trained is far better than someone that hasn't been trained. And the whole purpose of this whole, what we're doing at San Joaquin is not just to train them on the tactical stuff that Matt showed you today, but when he was talking about having mental health folks there and those types of things, it's training those SROs on those other parts of their job that are extremely important to be the gardener and not just the warrior. And so I always lean on the side of, I'd rather have the trained person there than the person that doesn't have any training and is coming into an environment where they're not used to working with kids at all.
And we are ensuring when we do the grant funding that they have the certain amount of training. So that goes into that piece. And the reality is that it doesn't matter what profession, we're gonna always have those people who are not doing the best. But I think based on our schools, our SROs are doing a fabulous job. There's always going to be that one that gets in the news. But overall, and we are working with our administrators to let them understand also that the SROs are not there to be disciplinarians. So sometimes the SRO is getting the rap and it's not always them. It's sometimes that, administrators say, little Johnny needs to do this and take his hat off of that thing. And now he becomes the disciplinarian, which the center is moving away from that and that's what we're going to have in our training. So I think we're going to be fine as well.
Just one other point, since we were talking about the Chuck recommendations, the Chuck did have a recommendation on selection process for an SRO as well, and recommended including community in that selection process. But I completely agree that there's, it's going to be within the discretion of the agency. And so, people need to go to their local law enforcement agencies and talk to them about the selection process as well.
And then in addition, I know you said there was a survey for the actual officers that asked them if they wanted to participate, but how often are we surveying the actual community families and students to see if that officer is a fit? Because as you say, there's always going to be that one just dealing with professions in general, but how often are we actually looking for how comfortable the community is, how comfortable administration is, if they've detected anything before the officer themselves will say something?
And so what I said earlier in my presentation is that we started a parent and community engagement program. And so that's where that would be addressed. As they engage with parents. And, let me just be honest. My husband and I, we have 8 girls, 12 grandchildren. It starts at the house too.
Right.
Okay. So some of the parents have to support us and talk about that and go to their local law enforcement if they're not feeling that that's not right, or go to their schools. So with the parent and community engagement people, they will be working in those communities with those parents to help the parents support their children, advocate for their children, support their children, and bring these issues up if those are a concern. Because, we have 100 counties, 115 districts. There's no way that we will know here sitting in Raleigh what's going on in these smaller communities. We just won't know.
And then one additional thing for as far as training, I know cameras has been a big problem and it probably won't get resolved immediately, but what training can you think of, like as far as within the center, have you all implemented for if cameras don't become available, and how we can, kind of find a path around that? And then also, I know you said you dealt with modular buildings, and I was born and raised in Holly Springs as well, so I'm very familiar with like the modular buildings. But in 5th grade, I was in one that was just that one classroom as a modular, and then in 3rd grade, I was in one where there were 8 classrooms in one hallway. So how are you also training to deal with those 2 different scenarios? Because that one classroom is going to be very different than the 8, of course.
Indeed, and I don't have an answer for all of that, other than as each year comes up, we have a lot of acres, and if we see a strong need for a new training platform or venue, we're going to go ahead and submit it. Mr. Torbett, Mr. Smith, there's several others in legislation that support this initiative wholeheartedly, and that would be my answer, is to ask as we phase this out. And I guess just to wrap up, your first question, could you repeat it? I think I got the second one, but not the first.
The second one was about the modular cameras. The first one was about cameras and how we could find ways to kind of navigate that without the immediate cameras if that doesn't become an option for us.
So we'll have the camera system there for training purposes.
Right.
But if we choose, if there was ever a need to conduct an investigation of a scenario and restrict the use of cameras, that's the only thing that comes to my mind. If there's a place out in North Carolina somewhere that does not have cameras, it just wouldn't be available, and testimonial evidence would be what we would have to rely on if there's no physical evidence through a camera.
If I could respond to your question from the standpoint of Guilford County, where you apparently go to school.
Yes, sir.
Aggie Pride.
Aggie Pride.
So in Guilford County, by way of example, you're dealing with 3 different law enforcement agencies. You have Greensboro City, High Point City, and Guilford County, who have 3 different philosophies to some degree, or have historically had philosophies. So you have a very interesting balance. With respect to the parent survey, I've never heard of a parent survey of an SRO in our county, maybe in other places. There have been, however, situations you also mentioned, is there any administration feedback, where there has been administration feedback to suggest to the law enforcement authorities that this particular candidate is not the best person for that role. I know that's occurred, and that's an important communication line to have, I think. Well, as the educator, when I grew up, there were no SROs in any schools, and it was the principal's job to take care of this. In some ways, one of the places where you have to be careful is the principal still has the lead job for his children when they call upon an SRO to take over that duty, which happens sometimes. That's not necessarily very good for the school or for the students. And so that's a balance that's very important. Also, this is why it gives that education on what the roles are is important as the SRO education.
Right, and it became very important to me because as a student myself, I've been put in a situation where I became disciplined by a SRO. So I do want to make sure there's something in place to where that, that kind of specifies which one should happen where and how it happens. And I just think, like you said, it's a lot of different things and a lot of different parts to move with. But I think it's just really important to make sure the kind of clear and cut contract of what should be done as far as a disciplinary and as far as the principal administration and what actually should go through the SRO. So thank you. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. Got one more?
I gotta say something. Just for informational purposes, back to Rachel's first question. There's numerous agencies in North Carolina who are looking at professional tracks of law enforcement, only putting people in positions that they are of the caliber to do and also want to do. And I know of a couple of districts that are also involving the administration in their schools as a part of SRO selection. And it really is kind of part of like a panel interview to make sure it's a good fit. And also there's a district that does a training program for new SROs. They train at elementary, middle, and high schools to see best of fit, not only what they want, but the administration, their colleagues in that school to see what fits best. That's one. And two, I'm working on a project right now around disproportionate minority contact, equality, equity. And I really want to challenge you when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, that's become such a finite group of words. I'm really finding that we need to think about it as family, environment, and school, the prison pipeline, because we're putting so much emphasis. Yes, there's things in the school environment, but we are forgetting tragically the environment that many of our kids are growing up in and the families that are not supporting them. And when we're not remembering that, we are failing them miserably in how we program and how we communicate with the environment and the families in their homes.
And just final thing, I do want to reflect back to the point. I know you say you didn't grow up with SR. That's what you said, correct? You didn't have SR?
A long time ago.
Well, I was about to say, actually, ever since elementary school, I've had an SRO at every one of my schools, fortunately enough. And my parents and a lot of the community can also reflect that, SROs were effective and they were well-spoken community members. The students knew them. They came to football games, a lot of stuff they actually did to, invest back in us as students. So I think it can be done. I just really want to make sure, it's something we focus on.
Thank you all. Please set the standard for the SROs and set it high. Society has the right to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Right, so, next part we're gonna talk about, and I moved my comments to the middle of the agenda here because it ties into the presentation that will come right after me, which is the firearm safe storage campaign that the secretary mentioned in his comments this morning. And so I just want to share some of the data that we're seeing on firearm usage among juveniles and what we're trying to plan and come up with a strategy to deal with that particular issue. And so start out with some of just the overall juvenile justice data. And I know I was talking to Vaughn before the meeting, who's a volunteer or contracting to be a social worker, although she's retired. They called her back into duty because things are just a little crazy out there. And the numbers are bearing that out, y'all. There is no doubt that after the pandemic, our young people are in great need of social support structures that were broken during the pandemic. And the juvenile justice numbers bear that out. So this, just to kind of give you the overall picture here, we saw increases in complaints, which are actually what would be considered a juvenile arrest in the state of North Carolina, shoot up from 29,000 to 35,000 last year. That's a 6,000 number complaint. That's a 24% complaint increase overall. And so just think about us in the juvenile justice system. That's a huge increase in capacity in 1 year. And the system is definitely getting overburdened. And it's not just the juvenile justice. We're seeing this in social services. If you go to any DSS offices across the state, you will see kids sleeping in offices right now because we cannot find placements for those kids quickly enough. And that is tragic. If you want to talk about something that's traumatizing to a kid, having a kid sleep in a DSS office because we can't find a loving home for that child to go to is obviously a message that's being sent to that child. And so we're seeing that system, we're seeing the JJ system, and we're seeing the mental health system all at capacities because a lot of these kids went undiagnosed during the pandemic because they were not in person. They weren't in those classrooms, and a lot of those kids didn't get the services that they needed at that time. The overall number here, the green line, is the actual number of juveniles that increased. So you can see we went from 11,000 to 14,000 in the last year. So a huge increase in the number of juveniles that are coming into the system. And so also looking at just the types of crimes that they're committing. And this is bared out in the report that was just reported to the State Board of Education, looking at the number of crime and violence that's occurring on school campuses. Those numbers shot up last year also. The number of suspensions went up in the last year. As you can see, the red line down at the bottom is the number of serious and violent incidences that are occurring by juveniles. It used to be about 4% of the population, and now we're seeing that it's making up about 7 to 8% of all juvenile crime that's coming into the system. And that may not sound like a whole lot. It's still a small portion of the crimes that are coming into the juvenile justice system, but it is now doubled what we saw just a couple of years ago as far as the violent nature of those crimes that these young people are committing. And so it just speaks to what we're seeing overall in the system and what's going on. So here are just some of the risk factors that we're seeing that young people are presenting with when they come into the juvenile justice system. And these this is obviously heightened from what you would see in an individual school because these are kids that are referred to the juvenile justice system. And what we're seeing overall is 36% of those juveniles are showing that they have mental health problems when they come into the juvenile justice system. So that's over a third of them have mental health problems. by the time they get into the deeper end of our system, which means into a confined facility, last year I didn't have a single kid that was admitted into a youth development center that didn't have a mental health diagnosis. Not a single one. Every one of them was diagnosed with a mental health. And 50% of them had 5 or more mental health diagnoses. What that speaks to me is that we as a system have not reached out and prevented these kids from getting deeper into the system with earlier services that were needed for those children to make sure they avoided criminal involvement by serving their mental health needs. 8% of them have been physically abused themselves. A lot of times we look at juvenile kids that are in the juvenile justice system and we think, man, those are just rough, bad kids. And the reality is that they experience victimization themselves. They have victimization. You guys just talked about the home life. Michelle was just talking about the family life. Well, these kids often don't have parents that are that involved with them or don't know how to work with that child and are trying to figure out how to make that work. 34% are alcohol or drug dependent. 10% of them don't have a home to go to when they enter the juvenile justice system. They're either in foster care or have no permanent placement to be in. And then I think one of the more disturbing ones is the statistic at the bottom here. I won't go through every one of them, but 34% exhibited, assaultive behavior, but 44% of them believe, this is the kids that are coming into our system, 44% of them believe that violence is the way that you have to solve problems often. That is their personal belief now, that they've been either taught that, they've learned that, that's a learned behavior. That's not something you come out of the womb believing. It's something that has been developed over time. And this is one of those things that as we think through, what can the center do? What can we do as a state to address this behavior that we're seeing among young people? We've got to be teaching conflict management. We've got to be teaching restorative justice. We've got to be teaching peer mediation, because these kids don't understand there's any other way to solve the problem other than to fight about it or have a conflict about it. We've got to give them the skills and the techniques in their toolbox to figure out other ways to solve those problems. So specifically, I want to talk to you about the firearm campaign that the Secretary talked about, and is going to be part of the initiative that was introduced yesterday by the governor on the Office of Violence Prevention. And why is it important? So not only have we seen an uptick in juvenile crime, we've seen an uptick in the number of kids that are using firearms as part of the crimes that they're committing. So this data shows you that back in 2018, 4% of all juvenile crime involved a firearm. Last year, it was about 14%. But look at the numbers overall. You're talking about we went from 1,100 incidents of juveniles involving a firearm in their incident that brought them to the juvenile justice system. Last year, over 4,400 of those incidents were firearm related. Where are these guns coming from? Kids don't walk into a gun store and buy a gun. All right, they're getting them from adults. They're either getting them from their parents' home, getting them from the car, like the Secretary was talking about this morning, that's still from that front seat of a car. What we need to do is educate our adults about how they can secure that firearm so it doesn't get into the hands of a young person. And so what we have seen is that especially motor vehicle thefts of firearms have skyrocketed. It is one of the things that we have learned now that gangs are often asking for initiation for juveniles is for them to walk around a parking lot and try to pop every door handle in the parking lot and see which ones they can get into. And they check 3 places: the front seat of the car. They look under the front seat of the car to see if there's a weapon. They look in the glove compartment to see if there's a weapon, because that's $800 that they send back to the gang and help to get promoted or initiated in that gang. And so we're seeing that across the system. Just a couple of weeks ago, I actually worked at one of our facilities because we were so short-staffed. And when I was in there, I walked around, and every single juvenile that was in that detention facility that day was in for a firearm charge. Every single one of them. And one of the things that they told me as I walked around and talked to each of them was that they were told by the gang because they were a juvenile, they wouldn't get charged. And so we've got to change that perception. We got to educate our kids that there are severe consequences to making a bad decision about a firearm. It's not just about you getting in trouble, but it also can kill somebody. And so we've really got to work on educating our kids, and that's why the EKG program that Karen and Michelle talked about earlier is so important, so they understand the true consequences of choosing to carry that firearm. But we've also got to make sure that our adults keep those guns out of the hands of kids. And so these are the types of charges that we're seeing with those weapons that kids are using. So assault, carrying and possessing, discharging of that firearm, injury to property, and murder and robbery are all on the list of those firearm charges that we're seeing. And what we know is that it is the older population that is possessing firearms, the 16 and 17-year-olds, but we're also seeing this with the younger population, and that was not true a couple of years ago. But the teal colored there that you see on the far side there shows you the uptick that we're seeing among younger kids also getting their hands on firearms. And so there's a lot of work that we need to do to really try to address this. A 19% increase in kids under the age of 16 now also possessing firearms. And so trying to think through what that campaign needs to look like. This is the actual raw number of juveniles that we're seeing that had firearm charges last year. And you can see each of those different charges and how they've upticked over the last year. And so what we're going to do, we want to start out with, and we have a bill that has already passed the House. One version passed the House, one version passed the Senate. That has called on the state to do a safe storage campaign. We didn't wait for the legislation to pass. We actually got some carry forward money that we started to work on this so that we could work on a safe storage campaign that will go across the state. We've hired a vendor, and they're here today, and they're going to tell you a little bit about the campaign and the work that they're doing to make this happen. That's going to entail having us have a website, an educational campaign, gun locks that we'll provide to people in the communities, but also a week of action that we plan to do later this year, where we'll go around the state working with law enforcement, with our social workers, our school folks to have this conversation. And I know a lot of student handbooks are actually including this now in their student handbook that they send home to parents about what the law says as far as safe storage of those firearms in your house to make sure those guns don't make it into our school environment. Just in the last month in Lake County alone, 13 guns were taken off of kids. In those cases, all those kids get to come to me in the juvenile justice system, and we're asking those kids, where did you get the gun from? Mom and dad. Mom and dad didn't lock up that firearm in their house. And so we've really got to think through how do we change that dynamic and have that conversation with those young people and our adults that are allowing those guns to get into the hands of those kids. So we got the marketing plan, and I'm going to have the vendor come up and tell you a little bit about it in a few minutes. Here are the overall goals of the awareness campaign. The legislation, just so everybody knows, this is bipartisan. It passed the House with everybody voting for it except 2 people. And so on the Senate side, we also had a great support for it moving forward. And so this is a campaign that we want to do to really encourage people to be part of the solution, to make sure these guns don't get in the hands of kids. And so here are the actual things that we're trying to emphasize in the campaign, making sure that people understand what are the mechanisms, the ways that they can lock up those firearms. Another part of it is that we created a safe storage map. This will have licensed firearm dealers across the state that have agreed that if someone needs to give up their firearm because they're either having mental health problems or they're having their grandkids come over and they don't want to have the firearm in the house while the grandkids are there, they can take them to this licensed firearm dealer and drop off the firearm and then come back in a couple of weeks or a month and pick back up that firearm. And so we'll have a map that they can go to on the website that they'll be able to click on and ask, where's a location in my area that I could drop off the firearm? And no questions will be asked by that dealer, that they can drop it off and then come back and pick it up when either that mental health crisis is over or the grandkids going back home and they feel like they can have that weapon back in their house. And so that's part of the campaign. And then it's also going to include the public service announcements, website, social media campaign. And I'm going to have Kelly Stone come up because I don't want to steal all our thunder and tell you a little bit more about it. Kelly's from Rheingold. They're the vendor that won the contract that's going to help us develop this. And Aaron's going to pull up the presentation for you, Kelly. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you all for having me. My name is Kelly Stone, as he said, and I work with Rheingold. We are a marketing and communications agency with offices both in Alexandria, Virginia, and right here in Raleigh. So I'm out of the Charlotte area, so made the trip over this morning, but excited to speak with you all this morning about just a little bit more about where we started with the campaign and where we're headed. So someone actually mentioned this statistic earlier that firearms are the leading cause of death among children and teens in North Carolina, which is crazy to think that it has surpassed car accidents. We looked at a lot of data around this, and just thinking about all the ways that we keep our kids safe. I have a 2-year-old at home, and I think of, securely buckling him in his car seat every time we get in the car. So this is kind of a crazy statistic, and really, why we want to be having this campaign and why it's so important. So I'm sure everyone is familiar. You're all natives to the state of North Carolina. But just wanted to call out this statistic here, 156 children and teens. This was kind of a 4-year average number between 2018 and 2021, but the number went up to 216 in 2021. So we are seeing that this is a cause of death of children and teens that is on the rise. Just more of a reason that, we need to have this campaign, and a lot of the information shared so far supports this as well. So just kind of walking through our 3 main campaign goals. The first one is to educate firearm owners in North Carolina about the need for safe storage. There's definitely an awareness component here that people maybe aren't thinking about it. Maybe they have no idea that that's the leading cause of death of children and teens, and so they're not really thinking about the importance of it. The second one is to promote resources that encourage safe storage of firearms. So getting them the right resources they need, the right messaging to know, okay, I'm on board with wanting to do this. I understand the need. Now, what do I need to go do? And then the third one is really involving and geared towards partners, which can be a wide range of organizations across the state. We know that people are more receptive to a message that's being delivered locally, that's tailored to them. And so we really want this campaign to have a huge partner component, making sure that we can equip partners to then deliver the messages locally, and be kind of those boots on the ground in their communities across the state. So kind of moving into, based off the goals, looking at our audiences, our primary audience is certainly firearm owners in North Carolina, both parents and non-parents. I think when we're thinking about this in the context of a lot of data around children, we automatically think of parents, but non-parents also play a large role in this. Kids may be in their home, they may have grandchildren, and definitely the piece about theft could, open anyone up to that danger. Our secondary audience will be those partner organizations. We're going to have a lot of messaging, resources, toolkits available to them to make sure, however someone wants to be involved, from down at the level of sharing on social media up to hosting a full-blown event in their community, that they have the resources and are equipped to do so and communicate the right message that we're trying to get across. So we've definitely started a lot of research and jumped into messaging here about, what do we want to communicate? We know that North Carolina is a very diverse state. Looking across the state, we have rural, urban audiences, multiple languages, lots going on in the state. And so we are going to need to tailor messaging for those different audiences. But as shown here, unload, lock, and separate will be a key cornerstone of our messaging that we want gun owners to know and kind of remember. As I mentioned earlier, the 2 main things that were kind of the why behind the campaign, or the thing that we are trying to make sure folks avoid, kind of opening their eyes to the danger of both child firearm access in their home, whether they're their own children or other children, but then the piece about theft as well. So those are the 2 main ways that we're seeing that kids are getting their hands on these firearms. And so it's the 2 kind of key issues that we want to bring to light through this campaign. We want to make sure our messaging is actionable, and that it really focuses on safe storage and not firearm violence more broadly. This is really going to be about the safe storage element, which will be, important to highlight. So just a couple of notes here on kind of the approach we're hoping to take. We do see that there's a big need with reaching audiences through trusted intermediaries, making sure, like I mentioned, that someone who they know and they trust is the one delivering this message. And so that's why we're going to be doing a lot of work with our partners across the state. We also will be, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but as we look at our social media and digital advertising campaigns, definitely using a data-driven approach to make sure that we're reaching our audiences. There's lots of different targeting we can use on lots of different platforms, so we'll get into that a little bit more of how we'll be doing that. So this campaign is being started from the ground up. So we are starting with, a unique campaign name, brand, logo. It's going to have its own look and feel. So we're excited to, establish that, and then it'll feed into all of these items here: a website, social media, PSAs, partner toolkits, paid advertising campaign. So really a full integrated campaign that allows people to be hearing about this message of safe storage online, in their local communities, through a website, through PSAs. So really it's going to have, multiple touch points with our audiences throughout the state. And we're, I think, in the final stages of hopefully finalizing a campaign name, hopefully this week. So stay tuned on hearing kind of the reveal of that, and, making sure that everything is really informed by our target audience. We want to strike the right tone with gun owners. I think that's certainly their target audience, and we want everything to be relevant to them. And so we are excited to establish the brand and then get moving from there with all the other items. All right, so as Billy mentioned, one of the main things will be our website. It'll really be the place where everything is driving people. So whether you see something on social media or a paid advertisement, our PSAs, everything will be driving our key audience to the website. It'll really be a hub for a lot of different resources. It'll be focused on those two audiences, both a lot of key messaging for firearm owners and then partner organizations. We'll have a variety of resources. Like I said, ranging from, you can share on social media, you can share resources, up to different types of ways you can host events. So whether it's, presenting at a local PTA meeting, we'll have resources for that, or moving kind of up a level there of tying into an existing event or even hosting your own event. So lots of different resources and opportunities for people to get involved will be available on the website, as well as the safe storage map. So hitting on both of our audiences there. We'll also be using social media and paid advertising, so launching social channels based on our campaign brand and name on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We know these are where our audiences are. We also want a variety of platforms to, be flexible with what types of content we're putting out there. The YouTube channel will allow for a lot of our videos to have a home and be easily shareable. And then we want to obviously use these social media channels to engage with the community and give them fast and easy ways to get this information. We know they're already there, so we're going to go to them on those platforms. We'll also be running paid advertising on both digital and traditional out-of-home platforms. So on the digital side, social media, search engine ads, display ads. It'll be targeted towards our audiences in a digital format, and then also in the more traditional formats of radio, billboards, bus routes, gas station toppers. A lot of the companies that we're working with who place this media have a lot of great data on how to reach gun owners specifically, and where are those people, and how do we reach them kind of time and time again with this consistent message. And as I mentioned, we will be targeting our messages for different demographics across the state. So the messaging may not look the same in Raleigh that it does in more rural parts of North Carolina. And that'll be intentional to make sure we're connecting with our audiences where they are. Okay, another component will be public service announcements, both video and radio. We want these to be educational and actionable. We will be, leveraging trusted and relatable sources, whether that's kind of the parent-to-parent message, or maybe it's a local leader who people trust, starting to kind of brainstorm what those different concepts will look like, and have seen a lot of, what other states have done, what other similar campaigns have done, to pull together some effective ideas there. So excited to see those released, and those will probably be coming out closer to that May, June timeframe. And then, as Billy mentioned, the Week of Action will be a big kickoff opportunity for this campaign, likely in June. We're still finalizing the dates for that. But this will be, not the whole campaign is on the Week of Action, but it's really a big time to highlight campaign messaging and encourage people to take action during that week across the state. So we would love to have, 100 counties, 100% participation with leaders in every county, hosting events, doing presentations, finding opportunities to engage with their communities. So I'm sure a lot of you will be, familiar with those events that'll be going on, and we'll be equipping partners to host those events, tailoring it to a lot of different audiences and giving them the resources they need, depending on the level of involvement that they can take. So really looking forward to that. I think it'll be a great opportunity for, getting the media involved, getting local communities involved, but it won't stop there. The Week of Action will really be at the beginning of the launch of this campaign, and then it'll continue on, and that will hopefully become, a recurring thing year over year as an opportunity for people to really take the next step. So then, last slide here is just kind of letting you all know to be on the lookout. There will be a lot of ways to get involved, and like I said, we're kind of in phase one of finalizing this campaign brand and name, and that'll really, everything will flow from there. So lots of opportunities. The plan is to launch the website in May, have that Week of Action in June. So lots more to come, and excited for the opportunity to partner with a lot of folks across the state, and spreading the word to other community leaders is another way that you all can help in the positions that you're in to get a lot of people involved. So definitely be on the lookout for more to come, and happy to answer any questions that folks have before we.
Questions that anybody has for Kelly?
Yes, when you talk about some of the
on our list. I'm not sure about getting on, that exact question list, but that's definitely something we'll look into. And that pediatricians are one of the audiences that we know we want to use as kind of the gateway to reach families. So certainly,
And my pediatrician does ask that already.
I know they ask about, I think there are fire alarms, but I don't know if they ask about Safe Store in particular.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it could be, she might have added it on herself.
Well, thank you all so much.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
So as the campaign moves along, we'll probably be sending out questions to you all to get your input on ideas of things that we can do with the campaign. So look for those emails as we move forward with it, because we really want to get some input from communities, and I know they've been doing some work with just trying to see what the research is saying is the most effective way to move forward. All right, so now we're going to have Dr. Ellen Essick present the Youth Risk Behavior Survey data. And Ellen, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you being here. I think Ellen's going to reflect on some of the data I was just talking about also, how we're seeing. Yep.
Actually, what I'm going to share compliments quite a bit of what you put out there, and I'm not sure compliments is the right word, but we'll use that. And I do realize I also stand between you and lunch, so we'll move forward. But I do want you to have an opportunity to see some of this data. Just a little bit about. Let me back up. Just like this, there's a delay. Okay. All of this work and the work that this group is doing as well fits within the whole school, whole community, whole child framework. And this is a framework that allows us all to work together and collaborate. And as a matter of fact, and we put the student in the center and the community engaged as well. So a very important framework for all of this work. And it's the work that our team does. And I'm not going to introduce you guys, folks, but just to show you that we have folks working in all areas to address some of the non-academic barriers that are student success. We know some of the academic barriers, but we also know that students who aren't healthy can't learn. So this is focused on some of those non-academic barriers. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey, just a little bit about the survey. It measures priority health risk behaviors and health outcomes of students. And you can see those listed here on the slide: unintentional injury and violence, sexual behaviors, alcohol and drug use, tobacco use, unhealthy dietary behaviors, inadequate physical activity, obesity. Those are all things we measure. So I'm going to cover a little bit of data here, but there's tons more. And my colleague Les Spell, who's our data and policy consultant, is here with me today. If you need more data, feel free to reach out to him and he can help you get what you need. But this is what's most important: student voice. This is the one survey we have in the state that asks students, what are you doing? We talk about their health behaviors all the time, but this is a chance for them to talk about their health behavior. One of the questions I often get is, do students lie? I'm sure some do, but there's been enough studies to validate this data over time, and we have some perfect examples of how it complements or is almost identical to some of the hard data as well. So I want to share some of this data with you. Also to let you know that this survey is conducted at the middle and high school levels. It's been on odd number of years. It's been collected since 1993. The data I'll share today is for the last 10 years, since 2011, just because it makes that trend line a little easier to see and follow. But we've got data back to 1993. All schools and classes are randomly selected. Thrown in a pot, randomly selected. It's a little more scientific than that because we're making sure that regions and race and ethnicity are all represented. So it's a randomly selected sample. Participation is voluntary. No student has to participate. If they don't want to, they can always say, no, I don't want to do this. It's designed to be done in one class period. It's anonymous and parental consent is required. We have moved to an online version. The last time, 2021, the data I'm going to show, it cuts down the amount of time it takes to do the survey in half. Students are very adept at using technology and can do a survey in a hurry using technology. So I'm going to share some of the data, primarily around mental health and some of the safety issues, but obviously there's more data out there. I'll start with bullying. The percentage of high school students who have seen other students being bullied on school property. And this has gone down. And let me back up. I will say that one difference in this year's data, 2021's data, is that we did the survey in the fall instead of the spring. We normally do the survey in the spring, but the CDC requires that students be in the building to do the survey. And then the spring of that year, there weren't as many students because of hybrid learning in the buildings. We didn't have enough to do the survey. So we waited till the fall to do the survey. And that may impact some of the data, and you'll see that on some of this. We'll know for sure in 2023 if the timing impacted the data. So bullying has decreased. Still 42% of our students said they were bullied, but that has gone down. We've also seen a decrease in that was seeing students being bullied on campus. We've also seen a decrease in the students who say they were bullied on campus. Again, they weren't on campus part of the time in that year, but that was in the previous year. So that may account for some of that, but that trend line is starting to go down. This is what's interesting though. We asked middle school students about being bullied as well. And we saw an increase from 2019 to 2021 to 28%. Middle school students who said they were electronically bullied. You think about it, that was the year that many students got technology to use at home. Some students who didn't have devices now had devices because of school. So we did see or use devices because of school. So we saw some increase in electronic bullying. That may or may not be the reason, but we did see an increase in our middle school students. The percentage of high school students who strongly agree that they feel good about themselves. And this is sad. If you look at 2011, 80% of our students said they felt good about themselves. And in 2021, only 49%. So a significant decrease in how students feel about themselves in that time period. And if you look from 2019 to 2021, another big jump down. All down. Percentage of high school students who agree or strongly agree that they feel alone in their life. And that has been gradually going up since 2011. So students feel more alone, more sad. And then suicidal behaviors. And I want you to look at this. I'm going to explain a little bit about this particular slide. We asked students, the blue bar is seriously considered attempting suicide in the past 12 months. The yellow bar, they made a plan in the past 12 months to attempt suicide. Green is attempted suicide. And the gray is made a suicide attempt during the past 12 months that resulted in an injury needing treatment by a medical professional. In 2015, we didn't ask if students attempted suicide. We thought we would collect that because we really wanted to know if students end up needing an injury. Well, and we did that partially because there's only so much space in the survey and we were trying to make sure we had all the questions we needed. If you look at 2015, 9% of our students said they made a plan. I mean, not they made a plan, that they attempted suicide and needed medical treatment. That is just astronomical in terms of raw numbers. So we called the CDC. We said, well, you run that number again, look at that again. Everything seemed right. 2017, we added in the question, did you attempt suicide? And then we also had the question, do you attempt suicide needing medical treatment? When that happened, the number that needed medical treatment fell back down to 3%, which is in line with national averages. So students really want to tell you what's going on with them. And they didn't have a place to say, I attempted suicide, but I didn't need medical treatment. So they just answered the question. So now we have taken out the medical treatment question and just asked them, did they attempt suicide? And part of that's because we can get the medical treatment numbers, raw numbers from the Center for State Statistics about what's really happening with our students. But what we've seen is that's all gone up over that time. Gradual increases, 22% of high school students said they seriously considered attempting suicide in the last 12 months. We also can look at suicidal behaviors with our heterosexual youth versus our gay, lesbian, and bisexual youth, and look at that. I mean, it's 3 times higher. Students who identify as gay, lesbian, and bisexual versus those who identify as heterosexual. Another trend that's alarming. This is our male and female students. If you look at 2011, female students, the percentage of female students who said they seriously considered suicide was at 15%. Move forward to 2021, and that is doubled, 30%. While male students have stayed around the same, little ups and downs, but they started at 14%. In 2021, they're still at 14%. It tells us we need to think about some of our targeted prevention efforts for our female students. This year we asked a new question. This is the first time we've asked this question to students. Percentage of high school students who did something to purposely hurt themselves without wanting to die. So self-harm. 22% of our students total, but 49% of our gay, lesbian, and bisexual students and 31% of our female students, which falls just in line with those suicide attempts as well. Another new question is the percentage of high school students who reported there's at least one teacher or adult in their school that they can talk to. And this was uplifting. So let me give you a little something that's a little better, because I've been pretty gloom and doom so far. 60% of our students say that there's at least one adult in a school that they can talk to, whether that's the teacher, the social worker, the counselor, the coach, all kinds of janitor, cafeteria worker. There's somebody that they can talk to in their school. And that was consistent among male and female students, higher among our seniors, who over time probably do build better relationships over the course of the time they're in school, and higher among our white students. This is another one, and this goes to a lot of the work that you all are doing. The percentage of high school students who did not go to school because they felt unsafe at school or on their way to or from school. And you can see the breakdown of our students. 17% this year said that they felt unsafe. Those numbers are higher for females, and higher for gay, lesbian, and bisexual students. But if you look at that in the trend, this is what's concerning, most concerning. I mean, that's concerning about the individuals, but also that trend continues to go up. So in 2011, only 7% of our students said they felt unsafe. Now we have 17% of our students who feel unsafe. And if you look at the middle school, which is the yellow line, it's just been a gradual bump up of that among middle school students as well. Not a statistically significant increase, but it is an increase among our middle school students. And one of the challenges with this particular question is we can't pierce out whether they felt unsafe at school or on their way to school. So we can't tell if it was through their transportation or was it once they were in the building. We don't get enough detail. We can't ask them follow-up questions in the survey. This is one that has also been very alarming for us in particular. The percentage of high school students who experience physical dating violence. And for as long as we've been doing this survey, it's been in that 8, 9, 7 area. This year it jumped to 13% high school students who had experienced physical dating violence. It also goes along with our sexual and physical violence for adults as well. I mean, that trend is moving since the pandemic. During the pandemic, we saw a greater percentage of folks experiencing violence. But again, important to look at that. And then we also saw the female data earlier that said our females had doubled and those who had seriously considered suicide. So it does, in my mind, I'm thinking, what's our programming going to be? How are we going to try to support and prevent some of this and support these students? So this goes along with presentation from earlier. The percentage of high school students who reported it would take them less than an hour to get and be ready to fire a loaded gun without a parent or adult's permission. 30% of our students can get it in less than an hour without parents' permission. 40% of our white students can do that, and 41% of our 12th graders, 35% of our males. So they can get that gun in a hurry. So again, that campaign can't be more timely. The need for that safe storage of firearms. Just a few other things related to the safety work of this group. The percentage of high school students who were in a physical fight on school property has been pretty low. I mean, obviously it's not allowed. So those numbers are going to be a little bit lower to begin with, but that has gone down just slightly. The percentage of high school students who were threatened or injured with a weapon on school property has gone down slightly as well. Although we've heard quite a bit of data today about access to weapons and students' ability to have weapons. That doesn't necessarily mean they don't have them if they've got them. This is just asking, were you threatened on school property? And the percentage of high school students who were offered, sold, or given an illegal drug on school property, and that started going down some as well. Now that's not one of those questions that has a lot in it. Were they offered, sold, given? We don't know which one of those they may have done during that time, but that has started to go down. And pretty significantly since 2019, the trend's been going down for a while. Again, this is what our students are telling us. I mean, these are just on the safety and mental health related questions, which we have more of those. But being able to listen to what students are saying and then target some of that's really important. And I think the gentleman from A&T mentioned that earlier, is that family, that community, that student voice being part of our solutions. I think that's real important. Also wanted to say that we are conducting the 2023 survey right now, this time. This survey's become much more challenging than it used to be to collect the data. There's all kinds of different reasons school districts opt out or don't want to be involved or are fearful of students answering questions. If you are in a school district, if you know someone who's around who asks about this survey, talk about the importance of this data. We ask you to, please. Because it's so important to have this to help guide what we do to help support students. And if the school district says, no, we're not going to do it, then they're not even giving a parent or a student the opportunity to say we want to be involved. So trying to get that permission early on, because it is more challenging than it's been in the past. But we are doing that right now, so you may hear about the survey. It's being administered as we speak in North Carolina. And then finally, helping children learn better. So to address some of these issues is incredibly important. Again, the pandemic may have had some impact on some of those answers, but even so, those numbers are pretty high. We need to really work and help support the mental and emotional well-being of our students. And their physical health has been altered too, but I didn't put all the physical health information up there because that's not directly what we're talking about, but it is important. So with that, questions or comments?
Is there a reason why this hasn't been brought to the elementary level? Because a lot of the things that's mentioned in middle school and high school unfortunately does happen in the elementary setting.
Well, one, we get funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to do middle and high school. Actually, just to do high school. We've taken it on our own to do middle school. And to put it in perspective, we get $100,000 to do this in another survey and manage all the data. So it's not a lot of funding to do that. Also, it's very difficult to get permission to ask questions of the elementary children. It'll be a really challenging survey to do. Could be done, I guess. And there may be some elementary surveys out there, but I don't think right now we would be able to do an elementary survey. But a good question. It would be great to have that data.
I think a lot of parent resistance is because for some reason I think some parents think that we can tie in the answers to their children or to their child and it may get back to social worker counseling. For example, this past week, Monday, had a student that her parent told her she couldn't talk to anyone and she had been cutting herself and there's a lot going on in the home. But we had to make her help. Now, she come back to the office. I saw her yesterday and she avoided me because I think she thought I was going to ask her how to do it. So a lot of times it's parents that tell their children they cannot answer questions, answer anything because they're afraid that we may know what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception and a common fear about this particular survey. These are randomly assigned classes. Students get a randomly assigned number that's not connected to their student number at all. And it's a one-time use number and it's filled out and it's just sent in. It's not recorded anywhere. So we have no way of knowing who students are. I'll tell you the closest I've ever come is years ago when I was doing the survey paper and pencil and I was standing at the door taking kids' surveys on their way out and I glanced down and a high school student said he was 7'3". And obviously he was shorter than me. So I was like, that might skew that result a little bit, but generally, nobody can go back and see what any individual student said. And for some folks, that's a problem too, because it means there might be some things they're telling us that we're not able to follow up on. But we can't get the data overall if we don't keep the anonymity.
I wanted to ask, do you know or do you have a rough number, the percentage of parents who do deny? Because I know in one of your earlier slides, you said it was an option for the parents to opt in. So do you know the number off the top of the head?
No.
Okay.
We don't. I mean, and most of our schools do opt-out types of permission forms. So they send the form home and you only send it back if you don't want your student to participate.
Right.
And over the years, most students have participated, and once in a while we get a call. We got an email last week. a parent who said, I don't want my child to participate, and that's totally fine.
And you would say it's like over 70% just ideally?
Lock their children out?
No, that they opt in, or you don't hear anything back? Yeah,
I would
okay.
say that.
Yeah, that's easily, it's.
It's not higher than that, probably.
Yeah, so where we do get permission to ask the student and their family if they want to participate, the participation rate of those students is very high.
Right.
The blockage comes at the district level or at the school level, not at, but if you do get it to the parents and the students, in general, participation is very high. It was slightly lower in 21, but participation of schools and school districts took a big hit in 21, but the individual kids themselves still participated at very high rates, around 80%.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
The challenge is getting in the school door.
Right, in the door.
The district.
Well, and I think the point is the parent opt-out rate on the survey is not the point. Parental voices to the schools and to the school boards and to the administrators. Right. What is creating concerns about getting adequate participation in it. We have to get enough participation to make it statistically valid. But I think there's a general consensus it's incredibly valuable information to have. And if we don't continue to encourage participation, and it truly is anonymous, we're going to devalue the only student which we really have. Right? And we're going to devalue the information that's of real value in trying to put together strategies of how we best help our children. So this has become a place of being a very serious concern.
At the state level, are there any youth advisory committees that kind of help you all interpret this data? And you're looking at some of these things and saying, hey, I wonder if this is a trend because of COVID or, whatever it might be. Are there any of those that, kids that can help dig in?
There are several groups that have student advisory committees, especially DHHS has, DCFW has one, and I know that those students are involved. I don't know the extent I have not asked them to look into this data, but they may, and that's certainly a good idea, is to have them look at the data. There are plenty of folks who do their own presentations and have the students use the data in their classrooms and do that. They can take the data, it becomes a math lesson, it becomes a health lesson. There's a lot of places where you can use the data and talk about it. And those are things that we encourage in the schools to use the data. But the pushback most recently has been a challenge.
I think when we talk about like targeted action based on the data, it would be helpful to have that student voice where they're reading between the lines. We're reading the data, but they're telling you this is what we're seeing in our schools. As it relates to this data, that will help inform the targeted action at the state level here.
Absolutely, I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Dr. X. I know we're over time, but I do have one question. Does our data kind of reflect the trend that we're seeing nationally also?
Absolutely. That would be my final comment. We're almost in line identically with the nation right now. The national YRBS data and ours, you can look at them and lay them on top of each other and they're mirrored. What I'd like to see is that ours doesn't mirror theirs. That ours is better than theirs. That's what our goal is ultimately.
And I think the last comment I'll make is if you think that there's something the task force can do to help encourage districts to participate, we'd be glad to be part of that conversation. And I'm sure that we could vote on something to support that moving forward. If that's something that you think would be helpful, just let me know, and we'll start looking into how we can push for school districts to be partners with it.
Absolutely. The more they hear how important this data is and that there's support for it. I think Mr. Duncan mentioned the loud voices, but they're not as many as you think they are. They're just they yell loudly and trying to get folks to understand how important and valuable the data is. So I'll get back with you. Okay, great. Something very direct. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
All right, we got one last item, and Elizabeth told me she's going to be short, so we'll get the last item in. And Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the stats.
Okay, just really quick update for the action plan. Reminder that the quarterly status updates are due to me today. So thank you to those of you who already submitted those. I'll be sending out that report later this month to the rest of you. And then the other thing is that this summer, we're going to be working on some revisions to the action plan. So I'll say more about that at the next meeting. There's no action needed at this point, but just wanted to put that on everyone's radar.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Is there any other new business before we wrap up the meeting today that anybody want to bring up, or topics that you would want us to cover at the next meeting?
Is lunch on you after this?
I'm sorry we didn't do lunch today.
I thought you were taking us all out.
Yeah. All right. Not hearing any, move that we adjourn and thank you all for being, members of the task force and coming today. We appreciate you. Thank you.